Actually, thank you to Radtag, but we still have to pay for some of these venues, so we have to pay for this tonight as well. Version 1 is paying for the pizzas that will be arriving in about 3 minutes, hopefully. So, and what I want to do is, as we do the simulation, we can eat and do the simulation and eat and do the simulation and eat some more. It actually looks like there's going to be more pizza than we can probably cope with. So, we'll take it home tonight. So, you can take it home tonight as well. So I'm the host, but I'm actually running the event tonight as well. So we're going to look at prioritisation, and I think if you go into most organisations, people struggle with prioritisation. But when we think about it, if we want to prioritise something, what are the things we ought to consider when we're prioritising something? What are the dynamics we should be considering?
Greatest value items.
Value, yeah, can I just take it as value? Yeah, value, yeah. Cost, yeah, absolutely right. We need to know the cost, so value over cost. Anything else that we consider?
Risk
as well, yeah, I like risk as well. Anything else?
There are mandates, government rules.
Regulations, yeah. And can I put in there sort of timing as well? Because you've got times as well. That wasn't hard, was it?
Well, what about boss and his thoughts?
Yeah, we'll come to that in a moment as well. So that almost feels like a bit like an economic framework for prioritisation. Looking at value, timing, risk, over cost. Yeah. In reality, how do we actually prioritise? Does it sound a bit more like this, which is what we call the highest paid person's opinion. Yeah. So I am the big cheese. I've got the biggest budget, and I want to do this because that's what I want to do. Yeah. You might hear it as LVD, loudest voice dominates as well. So even though we very quickly came to the things we ought to consider, what we find out in reality is that most people end up doing it using the HIPPO or the LVD as well. Okay. So we ought to be basing prioritised decisions on economics, and it's complex because there's a lot of interactions at play here. So we've got lead time, we've got the cost of actually doing it, the development expense of doing it as well, maybe the value we're creating and risk. Again, all of those things we've got covered here as well. But it's not difficult because each of those levers might pull in a slightly different way. So if we're looking at, for example, technical debt, if we want to get rid of technical debt, there's a development expense for doing that, but we might have to forego value now in order to improve lead time later. So all of a sudden you've got all these levers starting to pull in slightly different ways.
And there's also the allocation of fixed costs.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how those are allocated as to what the cost, what value is.
Yeah. So it's difficult, but at the end of the day we still want to sequence job for maximum benefit. Yeah? And there's a guy called Don Reinerson, he's written a great book called The Principles of Product Development Flow. If you're struggling sleeping at night, that's the book you want to read. It's a really hard book, but it's a great book, and it's got some great nuggets in there as well. But he would say, if you're going to quantify just one thing, quantify cost of delay. And I used to struggle with this because I used to really struggle with cost of delay because I couldn't really get my head around it. In essence, it's quite straightforward. Can you see this, guys? Okay. So let me give you an example. Okay. So let's assume that I'm going to run a conference, and this conference is going to take place. Today is the 1st of January, and this conference is going to take place on the 1st of June. Yeah. And I'm going to sell tickets to my conference. Yeah. So it's the 1st of January, and my conference on the 1st of June. I'm going to sell tickets. So is it safe to say that the curve will look something like that? So slow burn tickets initially. As people get near the conference, they'll buy the tickets. Yeah, makes sense. And that's my revenue. If I decided to delay setting up my conference from the 1st of January to the 1st of March, what might curve look like now?
Like within the...
Yeah, so it'll probably be something like that. Yeah. What is my cost of delay?
that gap.
Yep, that gap there. Right, that is my cost of delay by delaying that particular launch of that project by a couple of months. Okay. Let's assume now I've got another conference, and for argument's sake, it's going to start on the same day, and it's going to be on the same day as well. And actually, if I start the journey, it has exactly the same curve as the one above. But if I delay this project to the 1st of March, my curve looks like that. Yeah? Is my cost of delay bigger or smaller? Much bigger, yeah. Much bigger cost of delay. So now, if I had an opportunity between these two conferences, I could only do one, which one would I do first?
Well, it saves you the most money, or it doesn't cost as much.
You do the bottom one, yeah, absolutely right. Because if I don't do this one first, my cost of delay is much bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very simple. So I do the one with the biggest cost of delay. Yeah, you with me? Yeah. Okay, let's assume that I've got two conferences, and they're exactly the same cost of delay. Exactly the same cost of delay. But one conference only cost me £1,000 to put on, and the other one cost me £10,000 to put on. Now, same cost of delay, but the cost to put it on is £1,000, and the other one is cost of £10,000. Which one do I do first?
That's the one.
Yeah, that one, the cheap one. See? So it's quite straightforward. Do anyone get that?
Yeah.
So again, just make sure.
Are you saying you have to you get a choice whether you run one or two?
Yeah, one or two. If you had a choice of terms, which one I'd do first? Again, if it's same conferences, same cost of delay, but to run that one to be £1,000, that one is £10,000. You do that one because it's cheaper to deliver. Yeah. So let's just make sure we've got this as in terms of as a concept as well. So here we go. Priority choice. Equal duration. Which one would you deliver first?
C. C.
So equal value.
No, deliver
A. Excellent. This one. Now, because life's not like that. You have mixed value and mixed duration.
I think A. So
Yeah,
Bit more complex, isn't it?
yeah.
Suppose the cost of the race value divided by how long it's going to take.
Yeah. We'll look at that later. Maybe come back ones at the end. It's not.
Yeah, I think some other variables.
Yeah. Okay. So, what we're going to do, we're going to use a technique called weightest shortest job first. Okay. You'll always think you'll never ever remember weightest shortest job first. WSJF. You will remember it if you remember it as what should Jesus fund. Okay? If you remember it as what should Jesus fund, you'll never ever forget it. Okay? So we'll look at weightest job first. So in order to calculate WSJF, we need to estimate the cost of delay divided by duration. You'll sometimes hear that called as CD3. CD3 because it's 3 Ds, okay? CD3, cost of delay divided by duration. You might see that as a fully quantified calculation. So what the CD3 guys want to do is actually quantify in absolute terms some of the levers. That becomes quite hard, and we'll see that a little later on as well. So what SAFE does is use a well-known technique that we're all familiar with called relative estimating. Yeah. So we're going to use a way of prioritising some features using weighted shortest job first, but using relative estimating rather than fully quantified or absolute values. Okay. For duration, we're not going to use direction, we're going to use size as a proxy for duration. And when we do the debrief at the end, we'll look at whether that is a good or not proxy for duration as well. But the weighted shortest job first calculation is cost of delay divided by job size, because we use that as proxy for duration. But it's business value plus prime criticality cost, risk reduction, opportunity enablement, divided by job size. Actually, not too dissimilar to the economic framework that you guys came up with at the beginning, yeah?
Sorry, can you go back to the
Yeah.
previous one? Do you have any advice on who does the risk calculation, given that the top line is probably best answered by really senior business people, and the bottom line is probably best answered by people doing the actual work?
Should we do that let's do the simulation,
Okay.
and then we'll come back and answer that question, and actually we'll all answer that question and say, actually, who should be doing this, and at what layer, okay? It's not a simple answer. There is some guidance in SAFE in terms of where you can use weighted shortage on first, and where it wouldn't be appropriate. And then where you use it will probably determine which people will be involved in doing it. Does that make sense? Yeah, come later. So in terms of those three levers, user value, time criticality, RROI, value, this is what they talk about here. So we talk about user and business value, so relative value to the customer and the business. Time criticality, is there a fixed deadline? Is there an order? Is there a sequence that we need to think about as well? And risk reduction is, can we reduce the risk of this by doing this earlier? And if we do this, is an opportunity enablement. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about the theory, because what I'd rather us now, having just had a little bit of theory, is actually play the simulation. Okay? So, on your desks, you have a folder with some stuff in there. Okay? That's going to be a little bit easy because there's not so many teams tonight. So, but it's really important that you stick with me in terms of the process we're going to follow as well. So we're going to do it in little bite-sized steps, one step at a time. So, first of all, you, as a team, are a property development company. You have just bought some farmland and you've raised it to the ground. Yeah, I know. I did this with the Environment Agency and they said, Darren, you just can't raise farmland to the ground. I said, it's a simulation. But we had to have this debate and then they said, okay, can we just call it brown belt or brown fields? Okay, whatever. So, okay, your property development company, you bought some farmland, you raised it to the ground, yeah? You're about 2 hours away from the next major urbanisation, so you're really quite remote as well. What you want to do, you want to build effectively a satellite city on this farmland. Your marketing firm have done a great job in terms of what they believe are the top 9 things that you need to build. So they've got those as well. Your job is to prioritise them. Which one should we build first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. Okay. You have got reasonable cash reserves. So you don't need to worry about, oh, I need to do this to fund that. You've got reasonable cash reserves, don't worry about that. But your goal, as property developers, completely unscrupulous, is to make as much money as possible. Okay? Everyone happy with the brief? So you bought some farmland, you're quite away from the next conservation, you've got some 9 things you need to build, you need to prioritise them, using wedge shortage first, reasonable cash reserves, your goal is to make as much money as possible. Okay? So what we do is no, just what's development? WIP. Okay. Number 2,
Skilled accommodation.
scale accommodation. Number 3,
Shopping street.
which is crew.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you very much. Excellent. Table B. No.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Number 2?
Strip.
What, Drew? Wow.
That's right.
Drew?
Really,
Yeah?
I mean,
And skill.
let's go third.
Really? Wow.
Like-minded people.
That's okay. What about what number 9, guys?
Richie Rich Estates.
Richie at the bottom, yeah. Number 8,
Leisure on the House.
Lean. Number 7,
White.
White Down Estate.
White Down.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you're number 9?
Reach.
Rich? Really? Wow. Number 8,
Mobile.
Blueville. Oh, okay.
O'Neill.
O'Neill. Interesting. What was your number 6?
White Downs.
Oh, so you would. Oh, Wood White Downs, yeah? And what was your number 6?
Number 6 is
Extreme Technology Park.
Oh, okay, okay. So how did you find that? What do you think of the results?
Very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the middle, maybe that's why he did the cross.
That's
But
right.
Yeah.
I see that's one of the things.
Yeah. So we ended up with the same top 3, actually the same number 1, which is interesting, wasn't it, as well?
And the same number 9.
Yeah, and the same number 9 as well. Okay, so and although and actually number 7 and number 6 were about the same, both had 7 white down about the same sort of place as well. I normally sort of see Lee and O'Neill down the bottom as well. I didn't know you did that as well. Okay. Did it feel the right order? Are you comfortable with the order you've got?
Logically, or in reality.
Yeah, just in reality, did it feel like anything that concerns you about the order you've got there?
Yes, I think 4 and 3 can be, 4 and 2 can be replaced because it first is the supermarket or minus in the supermarket. And I think one would, based on following Tesco, reading about Tesco created this town based on they created a supermarket, big supermarket.
Yeah.
You kind of see people identity building up around it. So I would say 1 first, then number 4, which is the Blueville, should be number 2 as well. Based on our Tesco work,
Okay.
is the way.
What about your order? Do you comfortable with it, or do you feel like there's something that didn't feel quite right?
I think the top 3 seems about right.
Yeah.
When we looked at it initially, we thought, well, we want to build accommodation for workers.
Yeah.
We want to build somewhere they can go shopping.
Yeah.
And it was kind of those 2, and then obviously shopping.
Yeah.
I agree actually. Yeah.
Okay. So do you remember we said that you had reasonable cash reserves? Yeah.
Yes.
So actually, what could we have done actually if we wanted to change the priority slightly, or anyone notice that? So anyone notice anything about what was the? I don't want to try to lead the witness too much, but in terms of the property development, could you categorise some of the properties that you're developing?
Well, you had a picture down there.
Yeah. So so we picked the picture. What was the picture trying to denote? Do you know what it's trying to denote? The difference between
Shopping and housing.
yeah. Residential and commercial. Yeah. Now, if you created into 2 different value streams, a residential value stream and a commercial value stream. So now this, so line them up. So this is, here we go, like this, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, like that, and like that, and did them as 2 value streams, but you could do it in parallel. Now. How does that feel?
I feel more comfortable with this, yeah.
Yeah? Because sometimes when we run the simulation, people feel that actually that we're prioritising commercial over residential, and the houses come a bit late in the process. But if you've got reasonable cash reserves, and you can create 2 value streams, and you can fund 2 value streams in parallel, we can create them as 2 value streams. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can do that first of all. Okay, how do you find doing the calculation?
The only thing is the divided by different sizes.
Okay, we'll come to size in a moment, but actually doing the 3 levers, how did you find doing the rates of estimating? Was it okay? Was it difficult? Was some more difficult than the others?
The last one was the most difficult.
Yeah, okay. So why was the last one the most difficult? Why was that difficult, the last one?
Pardon?
Pardon?
Risk reduction.
Yeah, why was that difficult?
I think it's quite 2 opposite constraints.
Yeah.
You're finding out, you're kind of weighing the risk reduction with the opportunity enablers. It's quite
Also, the concepts of what risk reduction is
Yeah.
varies,
Yeah.
depending on the individual, and also there's no the first two are much easier to agree on.
Yeah.
The last one is
It's relative.
I was just going to say that the reason the business value is easy to agree on is because it's there, but in real life it's probably not there.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the things that's missing from this is the transport infrastructure.
Yeah.
We talked about being some distance from the energy tank. Not everyone necessarily has a car or a license to drive it, even if they do.
Yeah.
So, in order to encourage people to move in, you need the
Yeah.
support.
Okay. But maybe missing then is a epic.
Depending on the organisation, if they're risk averse or they are, the other way around, in which case they like to take risks and do that, that could also,
Yeah.
skew the ways in which things are being with error, because if the traditional organisations are just cool, then
Let's just go back. Let's go back to that last one, then, because you said that there's two things in parallel we're trying to consider, and they're sometimes competing as well. Risk reduction, opportunity amendment. What could we have done?
Split it.
Split them out. Have two separate ones. There's no reason why we have to have constrained to 3 levers. We could have 4 levers: business value, timing, and then risk reduction and opportunity amendment. That's perfectly legitimate. If you also notice as well, in terms of the first lever, what's the notice about the first lever? What did it say? User and business value. Yeah. Again, they can be different from what perspective you're looking at as well. So you can split out that lever. So there's no reason why, as long as you've got the components, there's no reason why you can't split out the levers into maybe 3 or 4, even 5. The only thing I would suggest is don't end up with 14 levers, because you spend forever trying to work them out as well. So don't think you can't split those levers up.
So if you were to split up the last two as 2 levers, would you suggest they can keep for the same value? 20 to 1, 1 to 20?
Yeah, same value. Yeah. I think the other thing you consider is at the moment we've got the 3 levers we've got here. You could go to 4, maybe go to 5. The 3 levers have all got equal weighting. Yeah. Do you remember what the goal was as property developers?
So we need to maximise
quick money.
returns.
Yeah. So our goal was to make as much money as possible. So maybe what we want to do is consider as well is to actually maybe think about splitting the levers out, but also weighting the levers differently. So if our goal here is about making as much money as possible, maybe we'd want to weight the business value higher than maybe the other 2 as well. And what you tend to find here is that if you've got a high timing score, you'll probably end up with a high risk reduction score as well. So look at your scoring, probably you've got those 2 as a pair as well. If you're doing something more regulatory or time sensitive, again, you could think about and maybe weighting that differently. So what I'll say is, if business value is important here, weight that as a 1, the other 2 as a 0.5. If you're doing something more regulatory and timing was really important, you hit this today, weight timing as a 1, and the other 2 as less as well. Yeah, does that make sense? Scaled accommodation. What do you know about scaled accommodation? What would we be building with scaled accommodation? Yeah, but what was it actually scaled accommodation consist of?
Hotel and hotel. Hotel and hotel.
A motel
Hostel.
and a hotel. Again, what was really required for the construction workers?
Well, the hotel gives them somewhere to sleep.
Yeah, or probably the motel in reality, yeah. So what could we have done with that particular card?
Separated into 2, so you could hotel plus...
Yes, exactly. So you could split those two as well. So again, so when we look at epics, it doesn't mean we can't know. So we're also always think about, can we split the levers? Do we need to weight the levers? Are there any epics we can split down as well? Okay. Now, someone's talking to me about sizing as well. So what do you notice? What had one of the biggest impacts in terms of the prioritisation at the end of the day?
Size.
The smaller size.
Yeah. So also,
by 9,
yeah.
7 out of 9 were in order of size.
Yeah.
Those are 200 and 300, which is changed at the end.
Yeah.
Everything else is exactly the size.
Yeah. So you look at WIP. The size had a major impact in terms of prioritisation. All of a sudden, it went from quite a average score to top of the pops. Yeah. So what do we know about size in terms of flow? Those are familiar with Kanban. What do we know about smaller sizes in terms of Kanban system.
Yeah.
Yeah, they go through the system faster. So smaller batches flow through the system a lot faster. So not only the smaller batches flow through the system a lot faster, they also get prioritised a lot higher as well. So if there's ever an argument, say, to your portfolio manager, program managers, that about splitting down something into smaller chunks, it flows through faster, but it's more likely to get prioritised near the top as well. Okay. Final thing I think is, in terms of actually doing this, could you imagine trying to do this with fully quantified numbers? So you could, in terms of business value, you could probably put the number in there, the quantified number in there. Can you imagine trying to do that for timing or risk reduction? Yeah. Difficult, that would be hard, wouldn't it? I think so. I think most people understand that cost delay is a great way. It's a great way of using an economic framework to sequence jobs for maximum benefit. They try and apply it. They can do the business value, absolute value. They can do the size, absolute value. But when they're trying to do the other two levers, they really struggle. I mean, you struggled in terms of relative sizing, but you got there. And interestingly, even though you had different discussions, we ended up with the same top three and the same bottom one. Yeah. And again, what would be great here was that you'd end up prioritising, start these 2 and 3s off, and then you'd come back and revisit these ones a bit later anyway, wouldn't you? Yeah. Final question. At the end of the day, we talked about size is important, it has a big bearing on it. Is size a good proxy for duration? Because remember we talked about, cost delays divided by duration, but we're going to use job size for duration. Is size a good proxy for duration?
No.
Not always.
Increase labour, reduce time.
So why would size not? When would size not be a good proxy for duration?
Well, the items also relatively the same size, a similar size.
If you can't compare that activity already with a known
So we're saying actually size. So we're saying if it's a big size, it's going to take a long time. If it's a small size, it's going to take a short time. When would that not necessarily be the case?
You can portray the capacity of the person as the experience of the people that are doing it. Because if it's an experienced people, then you can't rely on the duration because the time of doing it is different from any other example as well.
So maybe if they've got a similar skill base.
Yeah.
So they've got a similar skill base. So when's
But you need to have a really complexity of the task.
no, it's a small task. Only uncomplex. Got it. Dependencies. Yeah, you're doing a small task, but it's really small to do. But you're waiting for someone else to do it. So that's when small, in terms of proxy duration, could be distorted because you're waiting on something else to happen first. So just be careful when you're using size as a proxy for duration. If that particular task is dependent on something else as well.
An example of that is cars and planes. If you want to drive a car from A to B, you've got to also build the road. If you want to fly a plane, you've just got to build 2 short runways.
You get permission.
Yeah. Cool. So, how do you find the simulation? Something you think you could use back in your workplace with your stakeholders?
Only back to my question previously as well, because the business obviously will be in a better place to provide the business value, risk reduction opportunity, but the team who is doing the work will be better placed to provide the job size.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, some of these levers aren't provided independently, so you're right. So the people that want the work would probably provide the value, but you'd want the teams to help with some of the sizing as well. Definitely right, absolutely right. I think you asked me where would it be used. So if we look at the SAFE framework, so SAFE guidances is you could use weighted shortest job first at the portfolio level, a way of prioritising big epics. You could also use them at the programme level here. In fact, you can't really see it here, but it's got weighted shortest job first here on the scale framework. So you could prior the features as well. if you're working with really big systems and you've got a value stream level, you could use it here. They don't suggest you use it at the team level. Yeah? So features, capabilities, and the epic level, you can definitely do that here as well. Okay? And the features will be prioritised before you go into your PI planning event. For me, the beauty here is one, we've got rid of the hippo, we've used an economic framework, and even two independent teams without much guidance came up with very similar results, the top three and the bottom one as well. We've got rid of the hippo, we've got the OED, we used an economic framework, and more importantly, we had a conversation about prioritisation. And even if even at the end of the day you say, well, I'm not sure about this, it doesn't really matter if it's one or two to know, you've still got the top three that we've got to do.
It's not so easy to get rid of it.
Honestly,
You still need to go for the business value.
yeah, so and there's part of that as well. I think the other thing you've got to bear in mind is they can still inflate the value. I understand that, but part of, again, not for here, but part of what you need to make sure you do is when you then deliver the property or whatever it is or the thing you're delivering, you need to close that loop on funding. And so often what we do is we allow them to state a value and then don't hold whoever stated that value to account to achieve that particular value. So for me, really, really important is, again, you've got to close that loop on funding. So when you deliver it, okay, now we're going to hold you account to deliver that value. If you don't do that, they just make up numbers all the time. If you hold them account, they'll be much more think, oh my God, next time I do that, they'll increase my budget or whatever, they'll increase my cost. Yeah, and suddenly they go, I now have to be more realistic about this, because if I do this, my budget's going to go up, or my costs are going to be reduced. So you've got to close that loop. I'd love to think that this was my simulation, it's not. It's a guy called Mark Richards. He's a really good guy. He's based in Australia. He's a partner at a company called Context Matters. This simulation is freely available. You can download it. All the cards, you'd have to print them yourself though. You have to laminate them yourself and cut them all out. But also all the instructions in terms of how to set up the simulation, how to play the simulation, and also some guidance in terms of the feedback as well. His website is for Agile Not Anarchy. So if you look at Mark Richards, Agile Not Anarchy, you'll find him when you find the simulation. It's Creative Commons, so it's free to download. But if you've got any comments, feed them back to Mark. Great simulation.
What would you suggest would be the case where the value for the products, be it whatever system it is very hard to quantify? What should happen in those,
Can you give me an example of what?
Well, what's it called? Life support systems, or for example, fighter jets, and someone's behind the wheel and their life is at risk, how much is the life worth, in that instance?
Ask an actuary, they'll soon tell you.
Sorry?
Ask an actuary, they can tell you to a penny how much someone's worth.
It's,
Yeah. Or again, we could, sometimes I've done this where we haven't had the value on here, but all we're doing is relative, as you were doing, is relative. So is this more value than this one? Is this one more value than this one? And then just having an order? Or is this about the same sort of value? So again, you might not have absolute values, but you can still say, okay, in terms of what we're doing, is this more value than this one?
It depends on how much time you have. Because whatever it is you're building, I'm sure there's a business case and financial value behind it. So just break it down. But then that one will probably take a shorter time than it is to.
There's a place where you can put a value on another way, maybe not ethical, but put value on life or fighter jet is how much would it cost you if someone died on a machine? How much would you cost the company or pay on compensation? Reputation as well, you can put value on reputation.
Yeah.
That's how you can relatively quantify.
But most organisations, I know, will have some sort of portfolio system that will allow them to understand the value and the cost of doing something up here. Most will have some sort of return on investment, so that it implies some sort of value and some sort of cost of doing it as well, by whatever you need to do it. But if not, you can just do, why is this more important than this one, or more value than this one? Cool. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Shame we didn't have more here. If we had a few more. More pizza, because we really don't want to take out you, Alex. No. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Brilliant.